You would have to think so. It's hey, they had Ali Frazier back in the day at 1, 2, and 3, and after 3, you kind of knew there wasn't going to be a fourth. I think it's the same thing here. They may face again, but no way. I don't think that. I think this is going to be the last one.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, you look at New England. They're going to travel on the road. Obviously, New England has got to play the road game here, but. Is Manning? It feels so weird to ask this, but is he the guy who's in over his head in this game? I mean, is Manning just kind of out of place in a game of this magnitude at this stage of his career?
Well, he ranked 26th in the league in vertical yards per attempt. So is he going to be able to get things going downfield on passing? I kind of doubt it. He also had a very poor number in what metric I have called bad decision rate, which measures how often a quarterback makes a mental error that leads to a turnover opportunity for the opposing team. He used to be at about a 1% rate for his career, which means about 1 out of every 100 passes he's going to make that kind of mistake. He has 2% this year, so 1 out of every 50 passes. It's the kind of he's the kind of guy now who can make a kind of error that would turn the game around, and that could be the sort of thing that could really come back to bite them against Brady, who doesn't make those kind of errors hardly at all.
Take the quarterback situation out of the equation here, because I think Brady is going to top just about every list. Who's the better team, sans quarterback?
Well, I'm not even actually convinced that Brady is head and shoulders above right now, because from weeks 13 through 17 last year, he ranked 27th in the league in vertical yards per attempt. He ranked 5th over the course of the season, but he's really been trending badly, getting downfield passes. So I think both those teams are going to have to try and get some vertical passing game going out of their, from their quarterbacks for guys who haven't been doing that well in it. If you're talking otherwise, though, Denver's got a more powerful defense, and I still think Denver's running game is stronger than New England. So if neither team is able to get the vertical passing game going, and they've got to lean on those other two elements, I get Denver a big edge here.
Yeah, so Denver's defense against New England here, you look at what New England, and you mentioned the injuries that really hurt them late in the year. No Edelman, Gronkowski was in and out. But it seems like they're back to full strength here. So where's an advantage for New England to exploit Denver, who has probably the better defense in this game?
I'm wondering if Chris Harris, he's been battling an injury, so I'm wondering if he's going to be quite the shutdown player he was before. Bradley Roby had been a shutdown cornerback last year and earlier this year, but he's been a coverage liability of late. And Denver's been kind of hit or miss covering tight ends, too. So if you're looking at it from a personnel perspective, if you played this game, say, in Week 5, it's a game where Denver's got the guys who they could just play man-to-man and just go toe-to-toe against New England. But right now, I'm wondering if they can do that. And if Denver has a personnel drop-off on defense, if they're not able to hold up, and Brady, even if he doesn't get the vertical game going, if he could just keep hitting the dink-and-dunk passes, it might be something Denver will have trouble stopping.
What did Denver do the first time they played? I mean, people forget Denver beat them earlier in the year. They'd be one of the first teams to beat New England once in the regular season, and then again in the playoffs during this historic Brady-Belichick era. But what did New England fail to do, and what was Denver able to do that first time?
I think it did revolve around some of the running game, and I don't think the New England hit as many big passes as they usually do. So it's a matter of getting New England out of their game. Because the thing about Brady is that he's one of the few quarterbacks in the league that if you give him dink and dunk passes all game long, he'll take them all game long. Most quarterbacks, they've got these big, strong arms, and they want to show those arms off and say, hey, I want to hit the 50-yard pass downfield. Brady says, you want to give me 13 straight short passes? I'll complete every one of them. We'll go straight downfield. And I think that Denver was able to take some of that away as well. So it's one of those things where if Denver is willing to say, fine, we're going to take away the short passes and make you beat us deep, it's kind of a risky proposition, but it's one of those things where Denver might need to do that and say, hey, you're going to have to take the low percentage play.
Interesting matchup between Brady and Manning. As we said, it could be the final time here. Where you mentioned the downfield passing from Manning and the big play. But overall, how much of a drop-off has Manning had this season from even where he was last year? It just seems that, you watch him play, it's tough to watch sometimes. So, even further on the deep balls, what kind of season and what has really deteriorated from Manning's game?
He hasn't accepted that his arm isn't what it used to be. Last season, he ranked last in the league I'm talking the 2014 season, he ranked last in the league in bad decisions on medium depth passes. That's 11 and 19 yards downfield. In other words, when he's trying to throw dig routes, deep curls, deep out routes, things of that nature. And those are passes that can be very hard to complete. And he used to, there'd be if he saw a defender in a passing lane in the past, he used to be able to get it through a small window. And today he can't do that. So it's windows that he was able to complete passes in before, he can't do it. So he had troubles with that last year, and he's been struggling in bad decisions this year as well, like in a way he never has before. So he needs to accept, Manning does, that there are certain passes that I cannot make anymore, and that I need to pick and choose my spots going downfield. Because if he doesn't do that and he tries to force passes like he has the rest of the season, he'll commit 3 turnovers.
Does Denver have enough around him to mask, his now deficiencies?
Yeah, because they've got receivers who can go in one-on-one situations. In other words, he doesn't have to, where he gets in a lot of trouble is trying to force it into those zone windows. But if you say you've got Demaryius Thomas on the outside and you say, look, you just run a comeback route, and if the pass is there and the defender knocks it down, that's fine. Just protect me from an interception. If I lay it out there, cut the defender off, don't let him pick it off, or maybe I can throw a fade pass to you and you go get it. On those sorts of plays, it's really just a contested ball situation. He's got the receivers who can win that. So if he'll stick to those sorts of passes, he can keep away from making those interceptions. Having said that, Belichick is going to know this and say, I'm not going to give you those situations, or I'm going to have my guys try and go and win those battles. Casey
Joyner's with us, ESPN.com NFL insider at Casey Joyner TFS on Twitter. And, of course, there is another game. It's the night game, 6 o'clock. NFC Championship game, 6:15, right around there between we'll get your pick on the AFC game afterwards. The NFC matchup between the Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. It is in Carolina. Cam Newton is kind of which of these kids are doing their own thing here, Casey. You got the 3 classic drop-back passers, and then Cam. Where does Cam Newton rank in this group of quarterbacks right now?
It depends. If you take where he was earlier in the season, he's going to be one of the top guys. If you take how he was playing late in the season, he's as much of a risk taker as anybody else. I mentioned that bad decision rate number, and I wrote about that for an ESPN Insider article this week. You can find it on the ESPN.com. Newton had a 5-game stretch earlier this year where he didn't make a bad decision. He had an end of the run. That's a really, it's hard to do that. Most quarterbacks will have at least one every, say, 2 games or so, and he went for a 5-game stretch without having one. So that was a big plus for him, but he had as many bad decisions in the last 3 games of the year as he did all the rest of the season. So as the season started to really progress and it was okay, now, he's got a lot of this late season. We need to win the first, we need to get the first round bye. We're playing for the undefeated year. He started to force have any bad decisions against Seattle, but have a feeling that if the Cardinals can turn this into a shootout, that he's going to have to make some of those big plays and he might be taking some chances.
All right, the Carolina team, I think a lot of people still at 15-1 overlook. Is it time to open up and realize that this team's legit? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but don't you think people are still overlooking them?
Well, the Miami Dolphins in 1972 were undefeated, and actually they were 16-0 headed into Super Bowl VII, and they were an underdog against the team that had never been to the Super Bowl. So it just tends to, when you play the kind of schedule that they played, and as good as they are, they still have some weaknesses, and they tend to get into shootouts, and they don't sometimes win games in a dominant fashion. Like when they, the game they had against the Giants, and the games they had against the Saints this year. It's like you look at that and go, you guys, if you're that good of a team, you shouldn't be getting into a shootout with the Saints. You should be dominating these guys. And I think that's part of it, too. And I think people are also concerned they've got 2 of their top 3 cornerbacks, Bené Bewikere and Charles Tillman, are out with an injury. So they're sitting on 4th and 5th string cornerbacks opposite Josh Norman. That's could be a big problem for him.
Yeah, and I think with Carolina, Newton is such a polarizing figure. You either like him or you don't like him, or you think he's maturing, or you don't like him for the most part. I mean, if you don't think that he's matured, you probably are not a big fan of his. But defensively, are they the best defensive team out of the 4?
If Denver plays up to it, I'd put them first. And I do still worry about Carolina's front 7 can cover up a lot of those weaknesses that they have at cornerback. But when you've got, again, 4th and 5th string cornerbacks starting opposite of Josh Norman, I mean, Josh Norman can rotate things and say, hey, he can take your one side of the field and you can rotate things elsewhere. But I'm still not convinced that that's not going to be a problem for them either in this game or if they win this week, going to the Super Bowl. That's not going to come up and bite them. So I wouldn't put them first necessarily, but it's possible.
Carolina is another team that Newton is really the star. They don't have great weapons. Will that catch up to them in a game like this against – when you get this deep and you have a deficiency like they do at wide receiver, does that catch up to you finally?
I think that this game is likely to turn into a shootout, and I define a shootout as a game where both teams score 24 or more points. I have a feeling that'll be what this game is. The problem for Carolina is that, again, they've got the problems with the secondary, they're missing some people, and they don't have – if you line up the receivers and say, okay, well, here's Michael Floyd and Fitz and Brown, and you line up the receivers for Arizona against the receivers for Carolina and say, okay, which is the more explosive group, you look and say, okay, Carolina or Arizona's the better group, and Arizona also has a better secondary, even though they don't have Matthew anymore. They still have a better secondary. So when I look at that and say, a shootout is not the kind of game they should want to get in because those are 50-50 propositions to begin with, and Arizona looks like a team that's better suited to win that type of game.
By the way, these two teams, as Casey mentioned, shootout, 31 points against Carolina Panthers, number 1. Arizona, 30.6 points a game, number 2. But they both have very good defenses, number 5 and number 6, Arizona and Carolina. So you got 2 great defenses and 2 great offenses. How different are the Panthers? This is a team that made the playoffs last year. They won their division. They've come such a long way. But how different is Cam Newton? What is he doing so much differently from where he was just a year ago?
Oh, it is mostly around the bad decision rate, in my estimation, because when he came into the league, he had like that run in the first, I think it was 4 games of his rookie season that he put up numbers that like never been posted before. But his first 6 weeks in the NFL, he posted a 6.8% bad decision rate, which, if you're at 1.3% is the league average, and if you're at 2%, you're doing it badly. So he was just, when he came into the league, he's just taking an insane amount. He was making Jay Cutler look positively safe. And now he's gotten that under control for the most part, where he is willing to pick and choose his spots most of the time. Again, he had trouble with it late in the year, and it was something of a concern for me going into the playoffs. And you go into the Seattle game, that hey, we're going to see that type of quarterback. But if he can keep playing like he was in the middle of the season and take those long shot chances downfield and not make those sorts of mistakes, it makes him really tough to beat.
We're talking about quarterbacks. You got Newton getting attention. I don't know that people have paid as much of attention to Palmer, but he could have been a league MVP. He might be the league MVP. These could be the top 2 candidates here. Who would you rather have on Sunday?
I would probably rather have Cam, but I'm with you on Palmer, and that if you look at his numbers, he does fantastic on vertical passing, and he's perfect fit for the Arians offense. Bruce Arians, he posted on Twitter a few weeks ago saying, no risk it, no biscuit. That's his mentality is you throw deep. You make sure that you go on you're getting the vertical pass game going. That's going to be something that they're going to live or die with that. So Palmer, he is going to be that type of a passer, and it could play well in this game. But of the 4 quarterbacks in this weekend's matchups, he has the worst bad decision rate, and it's not a surprise given the way he has a history of forcing a lot of passes into coverage even before he joined the Arians offense, and he put him on this offense. It's no surprise to see that being the case. So I have a feeling whichever of these quarterbacks in this game, you can say it about both games, but especially in this game, whichever one of the quarterbacks is making a couple of bad decisions is going to be the one that loses the game.
Watching Arizona, they seem like they weren't sharp against Green Bay, especially in the run game. What if the Cardinals aren't able to run again this week?
Again, they're going to have to go to turn the game into a shootout and say we're going to have to go after the Carolina secondary. There is a bit of a concern too that Carolina has ball hawks in their secondary and get some pressure on the passer. And Palmer, it doesn't necessarily take pressure in his face to get him to make bad decisions. He's a guy he's going to look for a lot of big passes, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Ron Rivera, Carolina head coach, try and set up some defensive schemes where they're trying to bait Palmer into thinking that, hey, you're looking at one type of coverage and you're going to be throwing another type of coverage, or he's going to have his cornerbacks like Josh Norman, who, great thing about Norman, he's a shutdown cornerback. He's also a ball hawk. So they might set up some situations and say, Norman, we might rotate a coverage over the top on your side and let you ball hawks. If they happen to throw the ball your way, you go pick it off.
I love watching Carolina's defense. Luke Kuechly, he might be the best in the game at what he does. Thomas Davis. K'Wan Short has been unbelievable. We'll see how that running game of the Cardinals matches up with that Carolina defense there. It's Newton, Palmer, it's Brady, and Manning. We've got 4 stars, 3 of which, legitimate MVP-type candidates. Manning obviously not in that conversation anymore. But, all right, let's get the picks from Casey Joyner here. The early game in the AFC, can New England head to Denver and avenge the earlier season loss?
I think that Denver has more things going for it than New England does, both being at home. I still think they've got a better running game. I think their defense, personnel-wise, they're better, and it's a big thing, even if they haven't been playing quite as well of late. I'm looking at that and going, I just see a lot of places where if I'm looking at situations where I think how these teams can win the game, I'm coming up with more scenarios how Denver wins the game than New England. So I'm going to pick the Broncos.
All right, and at home, Carolina 13-1, Arizona, who some people, I think when the odds came out at the start of the playoff season, they were the favorite for the Super Bowl, but are they the favorite to beat Carolina in your mind?
I think Carolina wins the game because, as I mentioned about the bad decision rate thing, Palmer only had 5 games this year where he didn't make a bad decision, and I mentioned where Newton had a 5-game stretch where he did make 5 consecutive games where he didn't make a bad decision. I have a feeling it's a shootout game. Newton makes fewer mistakes than Palmer, and the mistakes cost Arizona the ball game, and Carolina wins.
All right, there you go, Carolina in the Super Bowl, and I think Newton this year would only be fitting if he ends in the Super Bowl the way he's played. He's been unbelievable. He's really matured a lot, and I think you got to give him that credit. So, the NFL championship weekend right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage starts at 2 o'clock this Sunday. Casey Joyner, everybody, back on Monday to recap the AFC and NFC championship games. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it.